think we need to turn that off.
Hello, everybody. There we go.
Okay, we'll get through this together. Our panelists, we're just filling up their beverage. We encourage you guys to do the same. Panelists, come on up. I think we may have found a solution to the screeching. We will switch mics. The things you learn when you work for a Chamber of Commerce.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Whitney Ridlaw.
And I'm Jackie Anderson, and as Brady mentioned, we are your co-moderators for tonight's panel, and we're so excited. So when I was younger, some of my most frequent memories of Broadband were gathering with my friends in one of our basements around one computer. And you can imagine what we were doing. We were trying to connect to the internet. And for those of you, maybe you can relate to this, but remember that old dial tone? We'd hit the button and we'd hold our breath and we'd wait and we'd wait, and all of a sudden it would connect. And we would all be doing a happy dance.
In fact, some of us still do a happy dance when we have a good broadband connection, and others do a happy dance when our Amazon package arrives in one day.
Yeah, times sure have changed, haven't they? And broadband has changed the way we shop, the way we connect, and the way we work.
So tonight's panel will tell you about the ways broadband has impacted our panelists' lives, their businesses, and their leadership roles. Leadership is not about a title or a designation.
That's right, it's about impact. It's about, make sure I get my spot. It's about impact, influence, and inspiration.
Impact involves getting results. Influence is about spreading the passion you have for your work, and ultimately, you have to inspire those around you. This is an adapted quote from author Robin S. Sharma.
We felt that it was very fitting for tonight, since tonight's panel brings together such a wide variety of perspective, inspiration, and all of it relates to leadership, workforce, and broadband.
Tonight you will hear from our different leaders, and they will all be referencing, or you will hear 6 of the ICF factors, some more than once.
And those ICF factors, sometimes they individually shine, while collectively they can establish a community's competitiveness in the digital economy.
So listen to the speakers, see if you can see the different framework in your stories, and let's get started and meet our panelists.
Panelists, will you take over and introduce yourselves? Yeah, Emily's going to start. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay? Can everyone hear me okay?
If you use a louder voice with the mic, then we'll be able to hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. Let me know if you can't hear me in the back. Raise your hand. My name is Ellen Wolter. I'm a researcher with Minnesota Compass, which is a project of Wilder Research. And we have been around for about 10 years tracking data and quality of life here in Minnesota. Can everybody hear me a little better? Lots of and so I'm here today because we have been doing a lot of work trying to provide better data and information across Greater Minnesota. We've always been a statewide project, but we've tended to be more Twin Cities centric. And so when we embarked on lots of listening sessions across Greater Minnesota a couple of years ago to learn what data and information people need, they said we need information about broadband. And so as researchers, we have really started to dive into what broadband data is available and how we can think about parsing out that data and learning more about who is accessing broadband across Minnesota. And so I'll share a little bit of that with you in just a few minutes. And then on a personal note, I was in the Twin Cities for about 10 years and recently relocated to central Minnesota and am now working remotely out of Sartell, Minnesota. And so my workplace has been wonderfully accommodating. But for me, this is also a personal story of needing to access broadband in a new location for my work. So I'm working on broadband while needing to access broadband as well. So, thank you.
Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Julie with hard U's, not Julie, but Julie. And I come from Consulate General of Finland in New York. I worked there for 3 months in commercial and trade affairs. So my background is from economic side and business administration and a little bit about trade agreements. But as you know, Finland is the home to Espoo, and Espoo won the Intelligence Community of the Year 2018 award, as well as 2019 it was the finalist in the European Capital of Innovation Awards, so in iCapital Awards. From personal background, is where my home is. It's in Rovaniemi, Finland. So I come from a bit or less rural parts in Finland. So it's in Lapland, and the also hometown to Santa Claus. So behave. Tell you a little bit background from Finland points of view and the broadband connection. We have 4G that covers 99% of homes in Finland. It's also our legal right to have broadband connection. We use the most mobile data per capita in the world. Thank you.
So I have two sons, one's 7, one's 3. I'm going to have them introduce you, and you just tell them you know Santa Claus. And they will listen to you really well. You can tell I'm the one that's not going to live the longest of this group because they're all drinking water, and then there's me. Well, nice to meet you all. I'm Luke Reardon with Data Marketing. I run a social media and digital marketing company in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I actually live in Sartell with my 2 sons who are going to get to know somebody who knows Santa Claus very soon. Actually, this is my first time here. It's an awesome venue, isn't it? And I'd heard of the place, but when I got here, I called up my wife and I said, Keegan gets off the bus, my 7-year-old, at 3 o'clock, bring him up, because I'm like 10 feet from the water and it's a beautiful day. So they're up here too, probably running around still on the playground, and it's great to get to know everybody today, so look forward to it.
Hi everybody, my name is Kelly Wilkes. I am from Canada. I'm from the small town of southwestern Ontario. It's called Wyoming. But anytime I say Wyoming, people are like, America? And I'm like, no, not America. Our town sign was actually just upgraded from 1900 to 2000, so way to go us. We're a really, really rural community. We're part of Blandin County. The way that I first got involved with broadband was actually through my father, who was working with the ICF program. Blandin County was in the top 7 last year. We did really, really well. I'm so proud of us. And it was actually through the ICF that I was able to become part of this panel here today. So I'm really, really grateful for that. I myself, my background is in law, and I actually work as a car salesperson right now, but I'm working as a youth representative for Blandin County's ICF Foundation and finding a way to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And one of those ways was through panels just like this. So I think stuff like this is incredibly valuable, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys today.
Thank you. My name is Vicki Hagberg. I will probably monopolize a little bit more time because this is a story I love to tell. I'm originally from the Iron Range of northeastern Minnesota. I grew up on a beautiful lake south of Hibbing, Minnesota. And like many people in my area at age 18, all I could look at is how far I can get away from northern Minnesota as fast as possible and hopefully get my schooling paid for. Luckily, I hit the jackpot on that and went to Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Turns out that is how far I could get and get my schooling paid for. So I graduated with a degree in civil engineering in 2008. And then I moved back to the area, which is something that I never thought would happen. I moved back for a great job in consulting engineering at Bar Engineering Company. And I worked there for about 10 years, working with clients in power, mining, and manufacturing across North America for over 10 years. And then I became president of the Chamber of Commerce of Hibbing, Minnesota, which is something that I never would have expected. And so the question I always get next is, how does a civil engineer become president of a Chamber of Commerce? The answer is community. So when I first moved back to the area, I struggled to find my connection and the anchor that was going to keep me in the small town, even though I had some family in the area. I had cut my ties and had assumed I would never move back to rural Minnesota. And through a variety of volunteer and community advocacy positions, I sit on the board of Northland Foundation. I was involved in our free clinic, the curling club in my hometown, and I was involved in a series of task forces, one being Recharge the Range. And Recharge the Range was a group organization that looked at how do we make northeastern Minnesota, particularly the Iron Range, more viable and more vibrant into the future. And I focused on community development and downtown revitalization. That connected me to the Hibbing Area Chamber of Commerce, as all things serendipitous do. And I ended up working on downtown projects with the president of the Chamber of Hibbing, Lori Fido. 2 years later, she encouraged me to apply for the job as she was retiring, and here I sit today as president of the Chamber of Commerce of my hometown. So that's an entire journey in itself. The Chamber is connected to Broadband in many, many ways. One of the largest being being the Hibbing Area Chamber being a facilitator as a Blandin broadband community. So Hibbing has been a broadband community under Blandin Foundation for 3 years now, and we have had a variety of projects that are so impactful in our community, from providing training to small businesses to help them thrive in marketing and social media, to providing technology to our elderly population so that they can stay in their homes longer. I never knew that my grandma would want an Amazon Alexa until I heard some of these stories about how technology can truly change lives for those who may not have grown up in the digital era the way that I did, but through these outreach programs have a whole new lease on their life and can connect and have a sense of freedom and independence that they otherwise wouldn't. To literally, our ER cannot talk to our ambulances right now in Hibbing, but that's something that's changing because of the broadband program. So there's this huge breadth of programs that the Chamber has helped facilitate with the help of Blandin over the past few years. And the last part, I told you this is going to be a while, is my picture of home. So I live on a beautiful lake called Buck Lake in rural Itasca County, Minnesota. It's about a half hour from Hibbing. And when I moved back to the area in 2008, one of my goals was to be able to live on a lake like I did when I was a kid and have that sense when you wake up in the morning and you see the mist coming off the lake and you're having your cup of tea or cup of coffee or whatever that might be. And it's a sense of zen that we're very blessed to have in our region. And so when I was looking for lake places, I was working still as a consulting engineer for Bar Engineering Company. This was not a 40-hour-a-week job. This was, if I was lucky, a 60-hour-a-week job. And connectivity was part of the expectation. The culture around work is changing. And so whether or not it was going to get snowed in at the end of a dead-end road on a peninsula on a lake in rural Itasca County and couldn't make it to work, or because my client had an issue that I had to deal with at 9 o'clock at night, I could do that only because I have fiber to the home in rural Itasca County. We sell this picture in northeastern Minnesota of a rural, idyllic life. You have recreation, you have the ability to own an affordable lake home, you have a sense of community in your small towns, but if you don't have that connectivity piece, it all falls apart. We can't do our jobs, we can't be connected. So I was joking a little bit, kind of, I always poke my St. Louis County commissioners in the Hibbing area and say, you could have had me, but Itasca County was doing broadband better. And so it does matter, and I hope we'll poke at that a little bit more through our panel discussion of how broadband really affects the ability to attract and retain our next generation of workforce.
Thank you. So first up is Ellen. Can you share some of the trends with us related to broadband?
Yes, I can. All right, so I'm going to share with you a little bit of data and information just to get us started. So we have some kind of a basis for talking about workforce, remote workers, broadband, etc. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how our communities are changing, some demographic information, a lot of which most of you know. But then I'm also going to share some broadband access information and just kind of share some ideas and some things that we've been thinking about in terms of how broadband can help to support our communities as they change. So we're getting older, right here in this room, we're getting older, but also our communities are getting older. So this is data of basically today, 2017 is the most recent that we have. And this shows the counties in Minnesota who have a share of older adults who are 20% or more. So that's the blue, darkest blue shade. And in 2020, this is what the map will look like. And in 2030, this is what the map will look like. So our communities are really changing in terms of how we're getting older across the state. And this has challenges in terms of how we're going to care for older adults, and also opportunities for ways in which older adults can contribute to our workforce, to volunteerism, and to our communities. This is really something that isn't new, but it's something we really haven't seen before. So the gray slides are the slides of growth in older adults the last 6 decades. And what we are going to see moving forward is really unprecedented, not just for Minnesota, but really across the country and really worldwide as well. We are also becoming more racially and ethnically diverse across the state, so our communities are getting older, but we are also becoming more often people of color. I think oftentimes folks think that persons of color, people who identify as people of color, are centralized more in the Twin Cities area, but really it's throughout the state that our communities are changing. This is just to give you kind of a snapshot of what that looks like. So these are major cities in Minnesota. These are cities that are 10,000 people or more. And you'll see that Worthington, about 60% of people identify as a person of color in Worthington. The other cities are largely kind of those outer ring Minnesota, St. Paul suburbs, and then also Wilmar is in there as well. So our economy is pretty good. We're doing okay. Our economy has always been excellent thanks to our human capital. We have a large proportion of adults working in the state. We are tied with Nebraska, and North Dakota is beating us. I don't know what's on that side. But as we think about moving forward, staying vibrant could be challenging. This slide shows you the share of working age adults and where they are projected to be in the coming years. And you see that growth is really going to be in the Twin Cities region. And so in greater Minnesota, in many of our regions, we are going to have a workforce shortage, which many of you maybe are already feeling. Maybe it's starting already. You see lots of hiring signs all over the state. I notice them much more now. So as we think about how we're going to fill jobs, how we're going to keep our economy going, how we are going to attract and retain workers across Minnesota, we have lots of ways that we have lots of creative solutions to come up with. Okay, and then these are some of the jobs that we're expecting to see needed to be filled moving forward. These are the industries where we're going to see them. So these are industries that, for the most part, require a lot of technology or will require a lot of technology moving forward. There's a lot of potential for innovation with these industries and jobs. There's fun. So just thinking about kind of food for thought, and one creative solution that we're talking about here today is working remotely. Is telework a way that we can help to support growth and a way that we can help to support bringing people into communities? So it's an excellent recruitment tool. It's something that young families and people are looking for in terms of flexibility in their workforce and in their family lives. Telework and remote work also helps you to expand and diversify applicants. You will get people that you maybe haven't seen before, people outside of your community. So you're building a knowledge workforce, like the Intelligent Communities Framework identifies as a critical success factor. You're opening up your applicant pool. There's research that shows that telework and remote working increases productivity and increases retention. And then there's a surge in remote work options. You're competing now with people who have the opportunity to work remotely. This is not something that is sort of on the forefront. This is really happening now. There's some recent research that came out that said in the last 12 years, telework has surged by about 159%. So as we think about what that looks like in Minnesota, this is a slide that shows you where Minnesotans are working from home. This data is a little bit imperfect for a variety of reasons I can explain later, but it does give us an idea, a proxy, of where Minnesotans are working from home. And you can see it's largely in greater Minnesota. Okay. I just highlighted a few of the top counties, and the top counties range from about 10 to 14% of workers in those counties who are working from home. So a couple of barriers I'm going to identify that exist for expanding telework options and for expanding the ability to allow people to work from home and flex work options. This slide comes directly from deep data. It's wonderful that we have this data, so we thank the Office of Broadband for that. And this slide shows you where we have the percent of households who have access to the broadband that the state of Minnesota has identified for their 2022 goals. Okay, and you can see that they are working hard to make this happen for us, but there are still gaps that remain, and still places where wireline broadband needs to be more sufficient and adequate. So as we expand those out across the state, there are also opportunities to expand telework and remote options as well. The other barrier that we have, and the other thing that we know about broadband, is that not everybody in Minnesota accesses broadband. We don't know all the reasons for that. It could be lack of know-how, it could be cost, it could be lack of need. But we know that in greater Minnesota, nearly a quarter of Minnesotans do not have any kind of internet in their home. And that includes wireline broadband, cellular data plan, any kind of internet access at all. And this slide just breaks that down a little bit for you by region. So some households just don't have a computer. That's not something that exists in their home. Or they don't have a computer and they've chosen not to have internet access. Again, we don't know why that is, but we can speculate that it would be cost, again, lack of need or lack of know-how. The other important thing to think about is digital equality. So again, this is another critical success factor outlined in the Intelligent Communities Framework. We know that low-income households are significantly less likely to have access to internet in their home. So about 50% of households that are low income, about $20,000 or less in their households, have no kind of internet in their home. So as we think about all the ways that we access internet, not just for remote work, but I think about the ways in which I use internet for my kids' school, ways in which I apply for jobs using the internet, ways in which I access internet to support my community. Not having internet in your home is a very big barrier. And then this is the Twin Cities region, just to give you a feel for the differences there. We also know that older adult households are much less likely to have access to internet in their home. Okay? So about 37% of adults, and I apologize, the 65 plus in the legend there should be green. So for older adults, this is important for a lot of the ways that Whitney is using it. There are a lot of technologies that are available now and soon will be available for older adults to help them feel more connected as they get older. It's also a way that older adults can contribute to the workforce if they want to telework or remote work and contribute in those sorts of ways. But we need to make sure that they're connected. And then this is Twin Cities, just to give you kind of a feel for the difference there. Thank you very much.
We're gonna see it. Oh, this one works too. We're in business here. Thank you, Ellen. That was great. So we'll transition to another panelist. Luke, I'm gonna ask you, can you tell us a little bit about your business? Super interesting, and then maybe get into how you work with your employees and your clients, because it's a very interesting story.
Sure, the slide was up that I sent you, wasn't it, behind me, and I didn't even talk about it, did I? I know.
Yes,
Sorry.
it was there. We can flip that.
It's difficult. If you could, that'd be great, because then I wouldn't, then I could tell Amy Jo sent that beautiful picture to me, that we actually used it and I acknowledged it. Thank you. So, as I mentioned before, I run a digital consultancy, digital marketing company. We've got about 32 full-time employees and work with about 165 or so clients across the country. So about 4 to 5, I don't know the exact number of our employees work completely remote, and then anywhere from, so out of the 32 full-time employees that we have, if you walk into our office, you'd be like, Luke, you're lying to me because I only see 10 to 20 people here during a given week. It's because even though we're in central Minnesota and traffic isn't all that bad, there's a lot of people who choose to work remotely throughout the week. So we let our team leads decide who can work remotely depending on their seniority at the company. And just to give you an example of what you're looking at here, since I'm finally acknowledging it now. So Afton there looking bewildered, but she's really smart, I promise. That's why we hired her. We have in our office glass that you can write on, you've probably seen before. But then Jason, who's in the black with the yellow data logo there standing, he's our head of digital advertising. He's actually looking into, it's probably hard to tell, but there's this weird like eyeball ET looking thing. You see that on the table? That's what we use as our webcam. It gives us a nice broad view so you can actually see everybody instead of the webcams that are on a computer. And then Miles there, who's on the Mac computer in the middle with the black shirt and the gray logo, there is communicating with an employee or two via a remote worker is on the other side of that. So often what we do at Data is have this example where we're using both a environment where we're actually in the office, and we can use things like a whiteboard or glass, and we have this combination of remote plus the people in the office working daily. So it's been a challenge for us, even though a lot of us we grew up in the technology world. We use a lot of different tools. Like, does anybody use Slack in the room as far as communication goes? There's a few hands up there. Good. It's kind of like the modern day MSN, if you remember that. And was it ICQ? Like, okay. Yeah, so it came back in full force, and all of a sudden it's cool again. But we use a lot of those tools in order to keep our culture vibrant and the values that we have vibrant, because that's probably the biggest challenge that we face with remote work. Is it's very difficult to keep a culture and keep that personality of the company the same as it is when you're just on a phone call. A lot of times you probably notice this, if you do a remote call versus an in-person call, which one's faster almost every time, right? The remote call, because there's less talk about the weather, because that's what we do in Minnesota. There's less talk about how you look, because you can't see anybody, because you're just doing a simple call. And so what happens is you have a lot more efficient conversations. Now, when we integrate video, one of the things we've done is, no matter what, even if you're in a sweatshirt, we don't really care at home or not, but you have to have your camera on for an internal meeting. That's one of our internal rules. If you're going to have a call with us and we will talk to each other and say, turn on your camera, why isn't it on? I don't care if you're doing the laundry right now. I don't care if you're in a sweatshirt. Turn on the camera. So we hold each other accountable to that and have fun with it too, because you know, I don't wear makeup every day, so our employees don't have to either as well. So it works out really well for us. And that's one of the ways that we try to keep that culture alive and well, because having that face-to-face communication is super important. And it's just different having a phone call than being in person. And I think we all recognize that, but we've done things at Data to really force ourselves, and even myself, there's been days where I haven't had my camera on because I'm like, nobody wants to see me today because I don't look very well or I feel sick. But having our team there and holding me accountable to is a very important part of our culture. And we do that in a variety of ways, and it takes investment. There's no easy on button. I mean, we have to subscribe to Zoom and we have to pay extra money to use these services, and it bugs me because I'm pretty cheap, but it's something that we need to do in order to have this culture where people can work from home. It's kind of like paying rent now, because what we do is we have a smaller footprint as far as square footage, and we actually hotel our office spaces. So the way I'm able to justify it is that our employees are able to switch off desks, things like that. We have conference rooms that are flexible. Nobody owns a conference room or a side room, so we're able to justify the extra expenses in technology by reducing our square footage. And so that's allowed us a lot. I mean, we've moved 6 times in 7 years, and I'm tired of it. So we're not going to move anymore, and we're not going to expand anymore because I'm tired of paying contractors and builders as far as our expense. So that's been a big part of me justifying it as an owner of the company, because it does become difficult when you see all these subscriptions piling up for video services, technology, etc.
Very good. Thank you for sharing.
Was that too long? Or?
No, we'll cut you off Yeah, of course.
So I wanted to add on, I think that's a really interesting story, and reflecting on my time at Bar Engineering, an engineering consultancy company in Minnesota, when I first started interning there in 2005, I was 18, there was virtually no inter-office work, okay? The company was about 250 people at the time. Fast forward, when I started full-time in 2008 to 2010, that was in its infancy. I see you guys laughing over there about how young I am. But so 2008 to 2010, in its infancy, I was one of the pioneers at our company that was working inter-office and having to use these technologies in new ways to have video conferencing, to work with people when you don't physically see them every day, or sometimes even once a year. And fast forward to, at the time that I was exiting my role full-time at Bar Engineering, I was on a project team that consisted of myself in our Hibbing office, 2 people from our Duluth office, 2 people from our Minneapolis office, 1 person from our Ann Arbor office, 1 person from a remote worker in Vermont who associated with no office, and we all came together to serve a client in Saskatchewan. Right? So the entire industry has transformed in the last 10 years, and I personally can't wait to see how that continues to grow and how we can really leverage these technologies to be more efficient. From a productivity standpoint, it's something that we as the United States have to do to continue to grow. We are lagging other countries in growth of actual productivity of workers. And yes, I still sound like a Canadian when I say productivity.
Thank you for adding on. Yuli, did I say that correct?
Yes.
I tried. She said really emphasize the you. So if you do that, then you might be doing it right. So Yuli, thanks so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit more about life in Finland and how Broadband plays a daily role in the lives of young professionals and students?
Well, as I told you, the 4G covers 99% of homes. So that means that we don't really have to move because of the broadband access. So, for example, studying from home is possibility, working from home is possibility, and it just makes it easier. 5G is already in building. It's in big cities already, so we have pretty good infrastructure to support this system, and the workplaces they are actually really flexible towards this kind of systems to work remotely. What comes to schools, you can watch the lectures from home as well. So yeah. What else would you like to hear about students? Basically the broadband is the basis for any economical trading, anything that happens in the country. Yeah.
Sounds like you guys have a good start there to making all those things possible. I think we'll go to Kelly now. We'll come back with some more questions, but we wanted to get back to Kelly. We have a question for you too, and you also have an interesting story to share. You have a long history of advocating for broadband, as you mentioned in your intro, but would you tell us a little bit more about it? She has lots of stories.
I have lots of stories. I'm filled with stories. That's part of just part of me. One thing that I wanted to start out with was asking you guys a question. So, what's the first thing that you say when you walk into somebody's house? Can I have your Wi-Fi password? And maybe that's just me because I'm young. I grew up in this technological age. And why do we ask for the Wi-Fi password? Well, it's because it's our backbone. It's our connection to everyone around us. And I remember being really young and one of my friends wanted me to go to her house and I looked at her, I was like, you don't have Wi-Fi. I can't watch YouTube. Why do I want to go there? And she's like, well, we can go outside and we can play in the field. And I'm like, I just want to watch YouTube. Go play in your field. And now you guys get to enjoy a lovely picture of me standing in a farmer's field behind my house, holding up a globe. And part of why I'm doing that is because for me, broadband and broadband access is about bringing the global community to the small community. What's very important for me, similarly to what Vicki was saying, was that I wanted to get out of Wyoming. I wanted to get out of my small town. I wanted to go and I wanted to not come back. And as I went through school, I kind of went from hating the small community to recognizing its value and to recognizing the fact that it's not just, small town values and everybody knows everybody. It's the fact that we have access to so much in these small towns. We're so close to everything and yet we're so far and isolated. And what's been really important to me is that youth retention. Because I did move back. I do now live in Wyoming. And you can add +1 to that population of 2,000 because I'm there now. Really exciting for me. And why did I move back? I moved back because I miss the small town and because we now have access to this broadband, and we're part of a new initiative to bring around $12 million worth of broadband access to specifically Blandin County. It's part of the SWIFT program. It's an initiative that enables the expansion of open access high-speed broadband to specifically rural areas where most companies have said, it's too expensive to develop here. It's too far away from everything. And SWIFT said, why? Why not? Why are these voices of these rural people not as important as the voices of those who live in very big communities? So $240 million are now going into SWIFT in southwestern Ontario, and my small community is part of an initiative to begin that. We're part of the pilot project. So it's taking a strictly rural area, promoting strictly rural broadband, and moving on from there. So now you can go to your friend's house and you can have their Wi-Fi password and you can watch all your YouTube videos and have your fun and do what you need to do. And you can go online and access research. You can go online and access data. You are part of this now global community, despite the fact that you live in a very small town, and that's incredibly vital as to why I came back. Now with youth retention, one of the biggest things I found was getting people involved from a young age. Now what I was a part of was the ICF Foundation, and we've talked a lot about the pillars. We heard John Young speak earlier about the benefit of having, you know, these pillars in place. And part of it is youth retention. It's bringing people back. It's bringing people back, giving them the ability to work from home or to work from an isolated area and still be able to work and contribute to this global economy. And to me, that's something that's really, really vital in terms of digital equality, making sure that all of our voices are heard and that the young people feel heard, so they feel that they're able to come back and still make an impact globally, despite being in a very small area.
Thank you, Kelly. I just have to tell a little story here because I was recently reviewing letters of support for a broadband project, and there was a letter of support from a high schooler in rural St. Louis County, and he said, "Nobody will come to my house." And it just made me smile and kind of get a tear and be like, okay, this work is valuable. And you know, when you're getting letters of support for a public grant project kind of thing, but from a high schooler, that's pretty exciting. So, switching gears, Vicki, today 46% of today's jobs are middle skill jobs, non-bachelors, but 82% of those middle skill jobs require digital skills. As you look at businesses in rural areas or located in downtown Hibbing, how do you think the businesses are using technology and filling jobs that require those digital skills?
I see this as two parts in my mind. How is the employer using technology to leverage its available workforce? And then what are the skills, those minimum level skills that your workforce has to have to engage in the current economy? And focusing on the latter, I think it's really clear from our day-to-day lives that almost every job requires some technology or broadband component. Whether it is your server at a restaurant, you'll still see some servers writing down your order, but they're usually taking that script and they're putting it into a POI system that's transmitting it to the cooks, tying into the invoicing system, tying into then the ordering system for food services. As I mentioned before, our whole society is transforming before our eyes at a really rapid rate. And there are very, very few jobs that require no connection to technology, whether it's sending an email, being able to do training on a computer because you might be in a rural area, you might not have access to a local trainer for your particular task, or you're cross-sharing across offices, as I mentioned earlier. Every employee, 80-some% of middle, 80-some% of 45%, are going to need technology in their lives, and I think this is a trend that's going to continue to grow. So it's important that we have training programs in place and look at from the K through 12 system to our technical colleges and community colleges, to our higher ed systems, that we are training our workforce to be prepared to enter this digital age and enter the digital workforce. So the other side of this that I mentioned is how are employers using technology? One of the biggest things that I've heard when I reach out to businesses in the past year is the workforce crunch. And we see this in numbers too, right? We're at near record low unemployment rates. Minnesota has near high across the nation labor participation rates. That means we have the most people working and the most need for more people to be working. So businesses are feeling this. You have CEOs that are pulling 80-hour weeks, working the floor on their manufacturing floor. They're doing multiple duties just because there physically aren't enough people and particularly in rural areas, those people available might not be matched from a skills perspective to the jobs that are available. And so this is a trend that's been continuing for the past several years. You know, whenever you're in an economic boom, you're going to feel this to some extent. So what can we do about it? I think you know, in one of my breakout sessions earlier today, we heard the story of DigiKey and how recognizing that in Thief River Falls, in a small community that needs an enormous influx of workforce to support this growing company that's providing tremendous wealth to the Thief River Falls area, how do you make it so that you can take a non-ideal candidate and plug them in and get the productivity that you need from that person? And so this is something that I think will continue to be a challenge and something that's looked at by all successful companies, is how can you use technology to better leverage your available workforce? There are pieces that economic development people and people that are in our higher education and education sectors can play in making sure that people are well trained whenever possible to fit into the available jobs in an area. But the reality is, jobs shift, demand shifts, and we as people and as educators and as economic development professionals can't always keep up with that. So how can we better use technology to make sure that we can connect a wider range of people into our workforce so that we can be more competitive as companies in our area? Don't worry, you don't have to answer that today.
We'll let you think about that. Thank you so much, Vicki. We wanted to save some time to open up this panel to questions from you out in the crowd. So think about a question you might have for any of these individuals up here, and in the meantime, Whitney and I had some questions, and so anyone can answer them. You can all answer them, but these are just shorter ones. So if there was a piece of advice that you could give to future leaders in the digital world, what piece of advice would you give to them?
Are we going to go down the line?
However you want to do it.
This is a tough one. For me, it's about finding balance. And so personally, I like to, while I find value from some connectivity, I like to make sure that I also have time for outside by the lake and in the fields, because it's important for my mental health and my well-being.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's kind of the same answer that I give to young people when they say, you know, how do I start? How do I start doing this? The way that I started was becoming a part of the community's engagement through the Intelligent Community Forum. It was a really, really great way to access different minds. And my biggest thought and my biggest thing that I've taken from this whole conference so far has been that the world is a think tank. And so long as we have access to this think tank, there is no limit to what we can do. It's being able to be open and adaptable and, you know, change, and being open to change and being willing to alter your ways so that you can fit in with the global economy, with the global community. If that means accepting broadband, if that means accepting technology, then sometimes that's the way we need to go. Because I think we all know which way the future is moving, and it's forward.
I think I would say finding the model that fits best for you and for your business and for your personal situation, whatever that might be. So make sure you're getting outside, making sure that you're being flexible, and then, like Luke was saying, making sure that you are connecting in ways other than just a phone call, experimenting with what that looks like. For me, I need to go into the office once a week and connect with my colleagues. And then I work from home 4 days a week. And so for me, that is the model that fits really well for our organization and for me as a person. But I think the advantage of technology, it allows you to explore and figure out what that best model and fit is for you. And there's a lot of, I think, potential exciting innovation that comes with that.
I would say, in a way, we're already doing it. So learning, curiosity, and creativity as well. So let's not stop, let's think further. For example, Finland, we don't we kind of compete with money or population, so we have to be innovative. And one way we have developed this is AI courses. So the government made this promise in 2017 that we will have this free AI course, elements of AI, so you can Google it, to educate people, especially the end users, because these are in many cases the biggest security risk for the new appliances and innovations we are going to have, like let's say the robot cleaner vacuumers we have. They will have your house details and every inch. So if somebody hacks in that, so you have to have some kind of knowledge what to do, how you're able to protect yourself. So in 2017, this project was started, and now I think 2% of the Finns have actually completed already. This year they are including entrepreneurs from SMEs to the board to actually develop this further and have more ideas from the company sides. So being creative, learning, curiosity, and going from there, like just thinking about how could you benefit from these new innovations, and how can you help your community and businesses towards a more innovative future and more secure future.
For me, and this is probably not the most exciting answer of the group, but it's the one class I avoided profusely and at the university I went to was business law, and how that's going to really get involved with technology as the politicians catch up with the law and how the internet works. I mean, it was almost embarrassing to watch them ask Mark Zuckerberg questions. They're going to eventually catch up with their questions and how they act with technology, but it was a laughing stock for somebody who actually understands how it works, or for anybody that is even closer to understanding how it works. They're going to catch up, and it's going to get really interesting. And just yesterday, I think it was last night, Domino's is going to be under a big lawsuit when it comes to the American Disability Act, the ADA, and their website and their app, because it's not accessible for people to use it who have a visual impairment or who are blind. And so they're going to get sued, and boy, guess who else is going to sue them? Not only one blind person, but a few others to follow behind them. So that's something that we're watching very closely, that I didn't pay attention to when I was going to St. John's University when I graduated, that I didn't care much for. But when you look at the internet and broadband, this is one of the big things from that Domino's lawsuit that's going to be unfolding over the next couple of years here, is that it doesn't just affect the big guys. It affects a small local mom and pop pizza shop who needs to have a website that is accessible to people with disabilities. And so if you think about rural Minnesota, the small businesses that are out there, one of the things that we're really focused on, that I never thought I'd say, is making sure that they're accessible to everybody. And I mean that just because I wasn't aware that you could even do that when I was in college. So it's an exciting time too, because you're seeing the internet not only be used for people without disabilities, but for everybody. And so you're seeing this proliferation of, it's a right. I love that it's a right to, is that what you said? Yes. That it's a right in Finland. I mean, that to me is one of the coolest things I've ever heard, and it should be an American value too, because if you think about it, freedom of speech. Well, how do you speak now? A lot of it, most of it, is not done with me standing in front of all of you, sitting actually, with a mic. It's on the thing that's in my pocket. And so that's super powerful. And I'm really excited about where that will go in the future for not only people like myself who have the ability to see and to type and have been blessed with that, but for people who don't have a voice or don't have vision. That's coming really fast. That's going to be one of those things that is going to move like lightning. And next year, it'll be old news if I'm saying that. I truly believe that. So that's an exciting thing, that broadband is going to have a big play in. It's going to come fast.
Thank you. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Raise your hand. Ooh, right over there.
This question is for Yuli. Finland is about half again the size of Minnesota. You have 99% coverage of broadband. How did that happen? Is it all state subsidized?
So the coverage is in homes, so Finnish homes. Of course, we do have areas that are not covered. These are really rural, mainly in Lapland. I think it all started from the decision to make the broadband a legal right for the citizens. So this is when the companies actually had to compete. The private companies had to compete. Who is going to build the broadband? Who gets the rights to build it? Because it's a legal right, so it has to be there. So this is how it got started.
Very interesting model.
Yeah, and one more thing, we actually have this kind of triangle. So I don't know, I'm not completely sure, but I think it differs from US way of doing things. But government don't have really much. They don't really get involved building the broadband itself. So it's these private companies that build it, and the government just regulates, and they support by laws about the new research and the new kind of innovations in a way that it's actually possible to build those. For example, we have autonomous ship research field in the sea, so I think this is the only one in the whole world. We're able to study autonomous ships, and they made the first ship, completed ship, with autonomous pilot in 2018, so last year, and it was completed. So the government, they regulate, then the companies, they cooperate a lot with research and academia. So what makes it interesting for the companies is that they will have the IPR rights. So this is why they will actually want to cooperate and do it a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question? Sorry, we're juggling with one mic. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. I was really taken back by the demographics that Ellen showed, particularly in the doubt years of Minnesota becoming all blue. I'm there already, but that's okay. And I guess I'm curious, is with that type of demographics, how do you see businesses using that as a workforce in the future? One of the big drawbacks right now that I have observed, and people have discussed it with me, is that they're very tentative about going out and looking for work online because there's so many scams out there, or they don't really have a good understanding of how to protect themselves from this, yet they still have an ability to be part of the workforce. And I guess I would open up to any of you that would like to comment on that. Thank you.
I do have something. We lost it. We're done. Are we? No, dead battery. Dead battery. Sorry. I was going to say that I have something to offer. In my rural community of Wyoming, Ontario, I was a member of the library, and I worked there for 4 years. And we had this program that I actually ran where we would have elderly people come in and learn how to use the internet. They would bring their iPads or their tablets or their iPhones or whatever that their children had bought them to connect with each other. And they would ask us to teach them how to use it. And I feel like libraries are absolutely integral to what you're talking about in the guidance of librarians and of young people in the community or middle-aged people in the community who can kind of help to hold one's hand through the process of learning how to use this technology can be really, really useful. So libraries, high schools, that kind of thing, I find are really, really helpful to kind of weed out what's scary and what's dangerous out there.
I can add to that too, and I would echo that those kinds of programs are really, really important. I sit on the board of Northland Foundation, and one of their programs, Age to Age, connects young people to older people within a community and have that intergenerational contact. And a lot of the programs that we see pop up in those communities are intergenerational teaching exercises for technology, and that's part of it. I think a little part of the problem is going to solve itself as we age into the future. So when I think about my parents, for example, my mom is in her 60s and my dad is about to turn 70. And my dad will never have a smartphone, and my mom has adopted one. And so I say that anecdotally, but I think there's something to it where 15 to 20 years from now, it's going to be just that much more pervasive in our society for this technology to be in place and for people to be more comfortable with it. And so I don't think it's going to go away. But employers are going to have to be creative about how they reach out to these populations, especially if the current trend persists, which demographics would suggest it will, between aging out and population decline exclusive of immigration into our state. We are going to have a worker shortage. There's no question about it. And this is something that's been predicted for a long period of time, right? And that the numbers aren't changing. It's going to happen. So employers are going to continue to have to be nimble, and hopefully we can leverage some of our resources like DEED, Career Force, Minnesota Works, to help support these new needs in reaching out to otherwise difficult to tap workforce in our area. So I hope that helps answer your question of it's a concern. It's something that we're going to have to continue to deal with, but I think it's going to get a little better.
Thank you. I see we're maybe just a few minutes over. Bernadine's giving me the look. So, as you can tell, we've got lots of things to say. So I encourage you guys to ask more questions. The bad news is we have to wrap up this panel, but the good news is that our panelists are able to stick around. And so I'd encourage you to introduce yourselves to them and pick their brains about all kinds of things. You can see just the diversity that was on this panel tonight. So thank you for joining us, and thank you so much to our panel.
So yes, indeed, the Northwoods Pub across the way